On the topic of Martin Kabrhel, we have an incredible hand here that happened on the stone bubble of the $250,000 high roller. That's right, there are 11 players left, only 10 cash, and if you bust here, you walk away with nothing, while 10th place earns over $500,000. Before we even take a look at the hands, we've got to look at the payouts to understand what's at stake here. So 11 players remain, and payouts go from $516,000 all the way up to $4.8 million. So it's about $500,000 if you cash, roughly 2x the $250,000 buy-in. We all know my opinions on ICM. ICM is for professional poker players that want to take their game seriously. Who would say anything else? At $250,000, this is the highest buy-in tournament of the summer. So with so much money at stake, this hand is even more intense. While we only have one of the two tables, we can see the chip stacks here at our table with I Hate People Who Look Like You coming in at 14 million in chips. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there sitting with 7 million. Vegas Howl's Husband, I think, sitting on 9 million. That Guy That Never Shuts Up sitting on 8 million. The unluckiest MTT player in history sitting on 4 million. And I think some random poker vlogger managed to make it into the event as well, sitting on 7 million chips. Anyway, our hand begins with Martin Kabrhel opening it up with 10-8 suited here in the hijack, and then the action folding to Daniel Negreanu, who looks down at ace-jack suited in the cutoff. This is a hand I think you could either 3-bet or call. Both certainly make some sense, but I like Daniel's decision to just call here, play some pot control, and make sure he doesn't get jammed on. If you 3-bet and your opponent jams, what do? I really like this decision just to call from Daniel Negreanu. Button gets out of the way, small blind gets out of the way, and now the action over to David Peters, looks down at ace-jack as well. I think this hand also tends to prefer to call. Make sure you realize your equity. Some of the same reasons why Negreanu doesn't 3-bet make sense for him not to 3-bet. Although I would feel a little less bad, I suppose, 3-betting ace-jack here against these two players and having to fold to a jam. Before we take a flop, it's important to think about this situation. We have a few players much shorter stacked than these three guys, with Chris Brewer at the table on 4.3 million, and then two players at the other table who have 3 and 2 million in chips. So there is some serious ICM pressure on all of these middling to middling upper stacks. Even though they're not playing against the chip leader in this hand, they have some serious ability to remove each other from the tournament and make it so you might wind up with nothing. All right, let's go ahead and take the flop.
Jack 8 ace.
Oh, how does that flop? How is this possible? And it's important to note, Donnie, and these two were talking about it earlier, Negreanu will care the least out of anybody that just, it's the bubble. Like you've heard it in the vlog,
David,
right?
He never
Not nearly as ICM conscious.
So, let's do...
Wants to win the tournament.
Like a bet. About $200. No, 200 euros. Make it expensive for the Romanian.
A minimum bet here from Kabrhel. He flops
Bubble.
trip 8s.
Bubble. No. Not like that.
A call from Daniel. Daniel also has backdoor diamonds.
I think it's crazy.
Peters has backdoor
Playing on the
spades.
bubble, when there is the guy
Again, how does this flop roll?
It's crazy.
750.
Check raise from D. Peters makes it 750,000. And this check raise here could ultimately save Daniel. Like there's a world where it goes check raise like this, call. Maybe Daniel just says, you know what?
Or at the very least, he calls here, but it saves him on future streets.
Exactly.
Alex Foxen over here to sweat the action.
They are hand for hand, so
One
hand at each
425.
table.
Wow, D-Negs is going to be able to
Look
get
at that,
away.
and a quick fold out of D-Negs, understandable.
1.425, I said.
Loses the absolute minimum
correct,
again.
Action back over to Peters. Makes the call. This pot, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, is 4.5 million.
On the stone cold bubble of the 250K super high roller.
It's a gigantic flop. Everyone hits. Both Peters and Negreanu flop top pair, top kicker, and Martin Kabrhel is out in the lead with trips. Speaking of huge flops, have you checked out the new Club WPT Gold desktop client? It mainly works. Why is it not working? The heck? Oh, you guys saw that, right? Okay, it went through. Wow, that's right. You too can enjoy the comfort of 4 tabling from your own personal computer at home. So make sure to sign up today using code Doug at Club WPT Gold. Anyway, the action does come Jack 8-8, 2 spades, everyone connected as I mentioned, and the action checks to Martin Kabrhel with 3 of a kind, who decides to bet a very, very tiny 200,000 chip bet. You know, I think betting small into 2 people makes a lot of sense, but betting the minimum here seems like a bit much. I'd probably recommend going for about 1/4 pot in this situation and betting something closer to like 350 to 400,000. Now Daniel Negreanu with ace jack. I think that both raise or call are on the table. I think when you're facing bets this small, you do need to raise some of the time. I don't know if I would do it half the time or a third of the time, but some of the time you should be raising. Now there is another player behind, so you have to consider what your calls look like when they call, and Negreanu does ultimately decide to take the passive option and just call. Over to David Peters now in the big blind with ace jack here. Very interesting spot with the very tiny bet and a caller. I lean towards raising more than calling here, something like half the time or 2/3 of the time I would raise. Look, you have to mix it up in these spots. I know it's annoying for people when you say do some of this, do some of that, but it's important to balance out your play. He does have the ace of spades, which makes it a little bit nicer to raise. You get some better playability on spade runouts. You might be able to rep things. You might be able to hit a backdoor flush, a lot more going on, and it's less likely your opponent has stronger hands. And ultimately, D. Peters does decide to go that route, raising it up to 750,000. Action now back on Martin Kabrhel. What does he want to do with 3 of a kind here? Now, typically when I get check raised in a lot of these static spots, I tend to just call my whole range because things can get kind of weird and I want to know I have my very strong hands. But Martin has other ideas. He still has Negreanu behind. There are lots of draws out there and he feels quite good about his 3 of a kind. So he goes ahead and makes it 1.4 million, a very small bet, 3 bet here on the flop. Maybe not the most standard of lines, but certainly does make some sense when you have 3 of a kind. Try and build the pot, get value, and maybe deny equity from some of these bluffs. A really annoying spot now for Negreanu, but he does have to just let it go, which he does. And you know what the nice thing about being famous in poker is? You do the tiniest thing and people love you.
Wow, D-Negs is going to be able to get away.
And a quick fold out of D-Negs,
1-4,
understandable.
25.
Loses the absolute minimum
Correct,
again.
What a play. What a play. Loses the absolute minimum. That's what we're here to see. All right, that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and I will see you. Oh, wait, there's still a hand going on? Back over to D. Peters. You hate to see this. It's very scary, but you simply have to start this off with a call. Another raise here, and you're repping way stronger than your hand. You do have a pretty strong hand, all things considered. It's certainly possible he check raise a draw on this flop. So it's time for D. Peters to make the call. He does, and let's take a turn.
Wow, spade on the turn.
Spades coming in. Peters, ace of spades in his hand.
My time already?
It's been your time.
What? Indeed on you.
10 seconds.
Kabrhel checks back.
The turn comes the 3 of spades, which kind of freezes both players a little bit. Neither player has a flush, although D. Peters does have the nut flush draw. We've got 4.5 million out there with about 6 million-ish left behind. So we do have a little bit more than a one-size pot bet situation, maybe like 1.5x pot situation, which is going to come into play on the river after this thing goes check, check on the turn. Neither player wants to make this pot any bigger. They both got strong hands. Let's take the river.
9 of clubs on the end. Right color, wrong suit, if you're David Peters. Kabrhel's got the check mark here with 3 8s. Action is on Kabrhel. It's been on him for a little while here.
10 seconds.
2 million.
2 million is the
Decision
bet.
time.
The river comes an intriguing 9 of clubs. So a couple of straights have gotten there. Queen 10 got there, 10-7 got there. And we all know that Queen 10 does beat 10-7 in straight situations.
No, this is just a fold.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
not a fold. Are
the
you
hell?
crazy
Yeah,
right now?
Unbelievable.
But back to the action, D. Peters checks, which makes sense. I think that it's too thin to go for value here. And now the action is over on Martin Kabrhel, and he has to make a very difficult situation decision here with 10-8 because it's certainly possible D. Peters has a jack. When you bet that small on the flop, it's more likely your opponent will check raise when they flop top pair. But there are some scary things out here. Queen 10, 10-7, 9-8 just got there. Jack 8 if he check raised a boat in the flop. All of the flushes that might check raise the flop and call a 3-bet. There are many, many hands that have you beat. But when you have an 8, it's now much less likely your opponent has a full house and is trapping you. And there are a lot of jacks you could potentially get value from. Also, it's a little less likely that Peters would be trapping with a hand like Queen 10 or 10-7 because those hands probably just want to bet. You don't really want to play for all of the money with those types of holdings. You bet the river and try and get a call. So when D. Peters checks, he's kind of polarized. And I don't know if I'm insane here. I haven't run this solution. I don't know what you're supposed to do, but I kind of feel like you're supposed to check back here. Even if you do occasionally get calls from hands like Ace Jack or King Jack, it's about as thin as you can possibly get. And if your opponent decides to fold those hands or jam them, you put yourself in a nightmare scenario. I think you really need to have somewhere around a straight to bet this river. Let's just say, for example, Martin had Queen 10 here. Well, now it's much more likely he can get value because of all of these 8x hands that D. Peters would have to check call. When you just have a middling 8 yourself, it's not so great to be able to bet and get value. Martin is definitely not a man afraid to bet and get some value, so he does bet, and let's see what happens over with D. Peters.
Now, Peters could call here, and he obviously would not be out of the tournament.
Time extension.
I think he has the last one. Just like to know.
This is 3 for him.
This is all Martin trying to get in his head. Certainly knew he was not on his last time extension.
Come on.
Oh my!
How much?
Oh no! Woo! Oh my gosh! I mean, this is sick if you're Martin Kabrhel.
After really not much thought, D. Peters decides to go ahead and give him the business, the full 6.6 million chips, putting his tournament life on the line. If Martin has a strong hand and calls here immediately, he is going home. If Martin has a middling hand and figures this out, he is going home. He has basically it all on the line here, although he did leave 325,000 chips left behind. I would like to take a moment to talk about this leave a few chips left behind thing because it creates a lot of value for players in these big pot situations. The way that it works is good players do it, so I know it must be true. I don't understand it at all. Which is why you guys should head on down to Upswing Poker and check out my newest course, I Can't Spell ICN. The pressure back now over on Martin Kabrhel. Can he figure out that his opponent is bluffing, or will he make a mistake in this super high roller field?
Look at the crowd circulating. Not only do we have all the fans and the media, we have all the players fascinated by this. And Martin lays it down. D. Peters!
Oh my! On the stone cold bubble of the 250K super high roller.
As the saying goes, Jeff,
David?
ICM is
Yes,
for poor people.
You can watch daily PokerGo content highlights on their YouTube channel or watch their entire offering of live streaming over on PokerGo.com. I'll put a link in the description below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you again soon.